Alright, now it's time for part 2 on disassembling this engine. So I'm not sure how far we'll get in this video, but my goal is to at least get all the accessories off the front, camshaft removed, pistons, sleeves, and crank. So hopefully we tear it down to a bare block today. Alright, first step, we're going to remove this radiator support. And you have 2 nuts here and studs that come through. These studs and nuts also hold this plate, which is actually the mounting point for the wishbone front end. So this actually supports the whole weight of the front of the tractor. That's kind of odd, there was no lock nuts on the top 2 studs. To the best of my knowledge, this has never been taken apart. But you never know. I'm actually going to use this for sure. The one on the parts tractor is bent pretty good. At some point they hit something hard and crushed the grill up against this and deformed this. And the hand crank hole here on this guide does not even line up with the grill on the parts tractor. Get the belt out of the way. Let's see if this will clear the crank pulley. Yeah, it does actually. That's one thing I've noticed on both of the tractors. There's a pretty good amount of wear on this pin right here. This supports the whole weight of the front end. They're just welded in. You can cut the weld, knock it out, and they are replaceable. So I'll probably be replacing that one. Alright, next step, we're going to remove the fan and water pump. This one is pretty rough. I believe this water pump's original. It's very notchy. The one off the parts tractor actually doesn't look too bad. Alright, 4 bolts hold the fan on. Fan's pretty crusty. It's usable, but the one on the parts tractor is a lot better, so I'll use that one. Alright. This pulley looks a little crusted on there. Might require a hammer. Might even require a pry bar behind it. It could be cleaned up. I'll use whichever one's best. Take them apart, sandblast them, paint them. The way this is designed, if you have a generator, if you have an electric start tractor, you would have this adjustment in the midpoint, and your generator would actually tension the belt. If you have a tractor that is hand start only, you do not have a generator, so you will have a belt that runs from the crank pulley to the water pump, and there's no way to tension it because you can't move the water pump. So what you would do, you loosen this screw and twist this outer sheave, and it will close the gap and make the belt ride higher, and that would actually tension your belt. Okay, we got 3 bolts, look like a 9/16. pretty crusty feeling. It barely turns now that I tapped on it with a hammer getting that pulley off. This little tube looks like it's in okay shape. We'll find out for sure once we sandblast it. I'll probably go ahead and use it. Barge tractor did not have one. Alright, next step, we need to remove the crank pulley. First thing we need to do is remove the set screw that holds it in place. Okay, try to focus this. There you go. There's a set screw here under this crud. Let's wire brush it clean so we can get to it. Let's see what we're doing. You can really see it pretty good there. So there's a couple ways to do this. You could luck out and get a wrench on it and break that nut loose. We can tap that nut loose with a chisel. There's not much room in there, so if you luck out and that nut falls in the right place, you'll get a little turn on it, enough to get it loose. Doesn't look like it's going to help me out there. Might have moved it a tad. I can't get a wrench on this one, so there's an option where I can tap this with a chisel and try to rotate it. First, I'm actually going to try to impact the set screw. Try to rotate it where the camera's not in the way. Let's see how this goes. Oh, it actually moves pretty good. There we go. Here's a set screw with a jam nut on it. This pulley is press fit on here with a keyway, so we will have to put a puller on it. I have this very old, crusty posi lock puller, which spent the last 15 plus years in a leaky shed. One day I'll take this thing apart and clean it up. The pulley off the parts tractor actually came off really easy. I mean, I did have to have a puller to do it. There was no way to do it otherwise. But it came off great. So if I break this one, not a big deal. This is cast iron, so it's not super strong. Let's see how it goes. And so here's the setup. Something I tend to try any chance I can if I'm using a puller and there's a chance of something breaking and going flying. At least wrap it with a rag, towel, or something, so you'll slow down those bits and pieces that may be flying off. All right. So here's our pulley. Keyway's in good shape. This one's definitely usable. So if I end up needing to use it, I'll just end up using whichever one turns out better once I clean them up. Alright, so next step, we will remove the governor housing and the governor, and then we'll remove the timing cover. So the governor itself, this arm attaches to the throttle lever up on by the steering wheel, and you push forward for throttle. This other arm attaches to the carburetor. So if you push it all the way forward, this will be wide open throttle until you get up RPM, and then there's a couple of weights inside of here, counterweights. And centrifugal force will press a bearing against this shaft and drop your throttle down. And this spring tension is essentially what controls your governor speed. If the spring is too weak, your RPM would be low. If the spring was too strong, your RPM would be too high. So holding this governor cover on, we have 3 1/2-inch bolts and then a 5/8 nut. Alright. Well, that looks amazingly clean inside. Wow, it looks brand new. This looks brand new just about. It's crazy. There's a little bit of crust in there. It almost looks like somebody took it out and cleaned it. Okay, so the way this works, when this spins, these counterweights spread, and this part here actually presses on that arm that goes to the carburetor. So there's a couple things to look at here. You got to look at this bushing inside to make sure it's not worn. It's in decent shape. The shaft itself obviously needs to match. In this case, I have a little bit of wobble, but probably not much play. The other part is this bearing here. So one side of this spins. There's a ball bearing inside of here. This one feels pretty good. What this does, presses against here. If this would actually seize up, it would probably wear this fork out. Looks a whole lot like a clutch throwout bearing, doesn't it? So you can see a little wear there, but it doesn't look too bad. Once I clean everything up, I'll just use whichever ones are worn the least. This gear looks perfect. So the other bushing to deal with is the bushing this rides on. So this is your magneto drive. And there's a bushing in the block here. So this would actually ride in. And it actually feels like it's in great shape. So these are timed. I don't know if there's any marks on here, or if when we assemble it, we just have to line this up this notch up a certain way. But I'll deal with that once I start putting stuff back together. All right, next step, we'll go ahead and pull this cover off. Looks like we got 3 more 1/2-inch bolts. Okay, we can't remove this yet. There is a stud that goes through the oil pan with a nut on the bottom that I forgot about. Actually, full stud and all came out. Makes it easier to remove. I don't have to lift up on it. Because honestly, if just the nut came off, I wouldn't be able to slide it off the oil pan because of these studs. Alright. Alright, so something neat here. The way camshaft end play is controlled, there is a spring inside of here with the spacer that rubs against this housing. Now, there's a constant oil flow coming out here against this, so it's well lubricated and it shouldn't wear. So if you don't put this in, I assume the camshaft would probably walk forward a little bit and hit the housing. Alright, to remove the oil pan, we got a row of 1/2-inch bolts on both sides. Alright, I'll definitely be using this oil pan because the parts tractor did not come with one. The only parts missing on that tractor were the oil pan and main caps. That looks nice. Like that. Looks like some brass and stuff in there too. The oil I drained out of it wasn't really too bad. Alright, here's the pickup tube. Wow, and this one actually has a strainer in it, which is nice. The parts tractor did not have a strainer. It just popped out. Let's see if we could see if this comes out. I'm not sure if it just pulls out or... There it goes. Try to focus on that. This is crazy considering oil that goes to the bearings are not filtered on this engine. That is paint and rust and crust and some fuzzy stuff, which I assume just pieces of filter because it broke loose over time. Wow, that's horrible. That is crazy. I'm glad I saw that because I didn't know there was a strainer in there because the parts tractor did not have one. It called this a strainer in the shop manual, but it didn't really show that it contained an actual strainer. So this is the pickup tube that will actually goes to the oil pump. Dipstick's right next to it. We're going to go ahead and remove this tube and get it out of the way. Just a piece of pipe. Looks pretty crusty and corroded in there. So we got our crankshaft. We got 3 main bearing caps. Our connecting rod caps. You can even see little tabs here for the shims where you adjust bearing clearance. Jam nuts on top of the rod bearing cap nuts. There's a couple things to pay attention to when putting this back together later. Number one is these rods, they're oriented a certain way. This is off the parts tractor. They're not all the same. So if you notice, this one here, we got to offset. This bearing journal is offset from the I-beam here. And you could tell also the location of this nut that locks down the wrist pin is on one side, right? So on all of these, I don't know how good you can see it, but you see on this one, the nut is on this side. On this one, or I'm sorry, not nut, bolt here. This bolt is on this side, on this, I guess this is number 1 cylinder. Number 2, it's over here. Number 3, it's over this way. Number 4, it's back over here. So they alternate. And the overhaul manual for this actually explains this. So you just got to pay attention which way it goes. This one, I noticed we got some marks here. You got 1, 2, see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is probably going to be the number 3 cylinder out of the parts tractor. I did not pay attention to where it came from. In that case, it really doesn't matter because I'm not going to use this. I might end up using the rod if I need to, if one of these are bad. But the rods generally are all the same, but we want to make sure they go back where they were. Especially your cap needs to match the rod. So next step here, we are going to remove the rod caps and drop the pistons out the bottom. Get this to rotate. Start off with cylinder 1 here. Just a magnet trace so we can keep track of stuff. Okay, we're getting there. My Phillips pry bar here. Okay, so that's what your shims look like. Well, it has a little mark on the side here, but it's nothing you could feel. Get a rag. These rod bearings actually look like they're in great shape. That's surprising considering what that strainer looked like. Let's see if these are marked for number 1. Alright. This one has a dot on it. That could be number 1. We'll find out when we do the second cylinder if it has 2 on it. See if we can get the slide all the way out the bottom. Yes. Alright. This is generally the rod bearing that we wear more. And it doesn't look bad. It's got that discoloration on the side and some marks you can barely feel, but nothing too bad. Pistons aren't scored up too awful. There's a little bit there. Rings don't look horrible. I mean, these are probably usable if I needed to, but piston and sleeve kits are so inexpensive, it's worth it just to replace it all and know it's good and not have to worry about honing or oversize or any of that. Alright. So I'll tell you what, I don't even have to put this back together. It looks fine. So this one's pretty dirty, but still not too bad. Look at our double marks for cylinder number 2. Okay. Bearing fell out of this one when it hit. Not too bad. Do have a little scoring on this one though. Rings are stuck. The third one. Top 2 move around okay. The middle one's, or second one's kind of rough, but that one's definitely stuck. Oil control ring's a little crusty there too. There was one valve that the way it was, the seat was rusted up. I could tell it was hanging open all this time. This piston might have been off of that one. But also, this is cylinder number 3. We got 3 dots on there. It's the same as the rest. 4 dots. I think this rag's getting to the point it's not making anything clean anymore. Yeah, this one's in great shape. These bearing journals, they feel okay. They look a little weird, but that might be corrosion from sitting. I can't feel any of that. And due to the way the bearings look, I think they're going to be fine. Just polish them up a little. So here's something interesting. I haven't looked at this yet, but there's something in those holes. Let's get a pick and see if we can get it out. Tell what it is. Feels like clay or something. It's probably just a buildup. Maybe this is a pocket to hold oil. Modern engines, you have pressure lubrication going to the rod bearings. What it would be is it'd be a oil passage drilled from the main bearing at an angle to the rod bearing, and the hole would be on this side. But this one, on this one, the rods are splash lubrication. So what happens, oil's going to be slinging off the camshaft and off the main bearings and everything, and it's going to eventually land on this hole. There's one on both sides of the rod. That's going to lubricate that bearing. Okay, so next step, we're going to remove the crankshaft. So we'll take off our 3 main caps. These are also shimmed to adjust bearing clearance. And we'll start with the center. You can see our shims here. This bearing looks fine. It's a little rough overall feel, but there's no shim. But not getting galled up or anything. There's a little bit of an offset here. Offset on this one. Front one doesn't have as much of an offset, but these two look very similar. Need to keep track. Which one goes where? Both marked the same casting number. So I'm going to need to mark that for number 2, because we got 1, 2, and 3. I'll set it down where I know where it goes. Alright, this one should be identical. Looks the same. Got some shims. Nothing different there. This front one's going to be a little different. This front one has a thrust bearing, and it controls the end play of this crankshaft moving back and forth. So on this bearing, notice we have this side section. I'll show you where that fits in just a minute. So if we compare it to one of the others, you can see there's a bearing surface on the side. When I get the crankshaft out in a minute, I'll show you exactly where it rides. So this crank itself at this point should just lift out. Set it here for a second. Alright, on this front main journal, you have a bearing surface here. There's also a bearing surface against this gear. Looks a little worn, but when this main cap sits in between here, it stops that crankshaft from walking back and forth. Nope, that's not good for it. Let's take a look at this here. There's a little bit of a high spot here in the center. Might just be where that groove is. This one looks a little rough, like it had sand in it or something, like a sandblast finish almost. I'm not sure how you would adjust your end play here, if it's even adjustable. This gear might press on with shims behind it, or it might be part of the crankshaft, I'm not sure. I'll have to do a little research and find out. But all in all, this crank doesn't look horrible. It looks like I just polish it up and can go with it. So this rear main seal surface is interesting. We have a spiral cut groove in the back. Starts here and goes around. And what that is, this seal is normally a felt seal that goes around this. And that spiral cut groove helps carry oil and soak the felt. earlier, we mentioned we have a wick on the back. This wick would actually lubricate the pilot bearing. I'm not sure where it's supposed to get its oil from the rear main bearing. I don't see where it would come through though. Maybe it gets oil through this groove, or there's a pinhole somewhere. We'll be able to tell more once I clean it up. Yeah, that front bearing is rough. It was pretty rough for sure. I'm not sure why it would be rougher than the rest. Maybe something to do with being further away from the oil pump than oil starvation. Our strainer was plugged up pretty good, so it probably didn't have enough oil volume to properly lubricate this front bearing. By the time it got that far, there was nothing left. Alright, next step, we're going to pull the camshaft out, but I'm going to move the camera where you can see more. Alright. Camshaft itself, the lobes don't look too bad. They're shiny in spots, but they're smooth and I don't feel any edge. I don't feel any play up and down on this. I'll try to move the cam. So at this point, with the camshaft, or I'm sorry, this point with the block upside down, the tappet should all be dropped out of the way. So let's see if we can slide this out. Yeah, there we go. Okay. The gear itself looks great. At least the wear pattern. I haven't looked at every single tooth yet. Got a couple marks on it. Don't know which one's a timing mark, but I'll figure that out later. Okay. Bearing journals look fine. Cam lobes look fine. A little bit of discoloration for maybe some surface rust. All right, see all your tappets lined up here. Ooh, there's a little bit of wear on that tappet. Oh, it looks worn, but it's not. All right. So that second one, pretty sure that doesn't show up on camera. Look at this second lobe a little closer. Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't feel anything. All right, so the trick with these is they have to stay matched to the camshaft if I reuse any of them. So I'm going to keep track at least where they came from. I will probably replace them, or maybe use the camshaft and the tappets from the parts engine because they were in great shape too. Okay, front, let's line them all up in here. Should keep track that way. All right, here we go. Let's see these cam bearings. They seem fine. Well, take that back. I didn't feel the top side where the pressure is. There is definitely some wear in these cam bearings. Let me move the camera, see if we get to see that. And if you look, you see this little raised spot in the center. That raised spot matches the groove in the camshaft. So essentially what you have is this groove in the camshaft where it will not wear the bearing, and the bearing wears away on either side of it. So if you have that little raised spot in the bearing, it's bad. If you don't, it's probably okay. It's going to wear on the bottom side more because of the weight of the camshaft and the pressure on the push rods pushing the camshaft down. The top on this, there's no wear at all. It's smooth. Bottom has all the wear. So this one will definitely need cam bearings. Next up, we're going to try to knock these sleeves out. Something neat on these old tractors, not just Allis Chalmers, but every older one I've seen, they paint the inside of the block. But the reason they paint it is because condensation forms on the inside of this block. And if condensation formed on cast iron and has been sitting a while, it will actually create rust. And then the condensation will drip down the side, and you'll end up with a whole lot of rust in your oil. The transmissions are painted on the inside too for the same reason. Alright, so I've seen these sleeves come out easy, and I've seen them take a puller. So I'm going to start with a 2x4 approach, hit the top of it with a hammer, see if it drives it out the bottom. In case it falls out of the bottom, let me place a towel under there to catch it so it doesn't bang anything. I'm not going to be reusing these, so it doesn't matter, but still don't want to hit anything. Yeah, it's starting to move. I can feel it on the bottom side. It's a little higher than the deck now. Alright. Boy, that's crusty. Where that water jacket is pretty rough. So we have a couple O-rings on the bottom. Those seal against this surface here. And what that's going to do is keep the water from leaking, water and coolant from leaking from the water jacket into the oil pan. On the top half, we don't have any seals. The combustion seal on the head gasket fits tightly around here and seals it. There's a little bit of a ridge here from wear, but nothing too bad. I'm going to go ahead and knock the rest of these out. There's a crack I'm concerned with. This is cracked all the way through. This one in the center has got a pretty good gap. It's cracked all the way through. And that one's cracked all the way through. So this is apparently a fairly common issue. The parts tractor I took apart did not have cracks in it. I'm kind of torn. I want to keep this block because of serial number, because this tractor has sentimental value. But the other block's in a lot better shape, so I'll do a little research and find out if all three being cracked is a big issue or not. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. Y'all will find out when we go to the assembly video. There's a lot of crust in here in the water jacket. We hardly ever ran coolant in this thing. It was usually water, then drain it in the winter. You can kind of tell. The lower portion I was looking at earlier, there doesn't seem to be any cracks here. And that's the real important one, because that keeps the coolant out of the oil. But we'll clean it up and see what it looks like. I'll probably go ahead and clean up the other block too, just to compare them. I don't know, if the other block does not need cam bearings, that might seal the deal. We'll see. And in the next video, we will take apart the oil pumps and compare those and see if they need any replacement parts or if we could just build one. And probably take apart the water pump and thermostat too. I'm going to add one more thing I noticed here. Already ended this video technically, but I'll throw this in the video somewhere. I have two different pistons here. One on the right is my parts tractor. One on the left is my tractor. They are both 53s. This one is an early production 53, early in 53, and this is later in 53. The only difference between the tractors on the outside is one had a distributor and one had a magneto. The parts tractor had a distributor. But these are different, so I don't know if they had a change or possibly an overhaul. Let's see if we can see any markings. Let me turn on the light here. I don't know. This one has nothing. I think it had something on the outside here. Yeah. So it's got that. I don't know what that is. But I guess I'm going to need to do some research here. Doesn't matter because I'm replacing them. But I'm curious. So we got 225652. I don't know. If y'all have any idea, let me know. Also noticed the oil control ring is different. This is a cast iron style ring, and this is a multi-piece oil control ring on this piston. This might have been overhauled. This might be a replacement. If y'all know for sure, let me know.